Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. This time out, an emulation of a high-end hardware reverb for your DAW. Let's get started. Today we're checking out Reverb Foundry's HD Cart. Now HD Cart recreates a very high-end reverb from the 80s, the 480L that was made by Lexicon. Now I had a 480L in my studio in Nashville. It's an incredible sounding reverb processor, and with HD Cart, Reverb Foundry has taken it even further. The reason for that is the 480L as it stood had two processing boards in it, but the native algorithms that were inside the unit didn't access both of those boards. There was a second optional card called the HD card that actually did surround processing. Now this surround processing took advantage of both of the boards that were inside the 480L. So what Reverb Foundry has done is allowed you to emulate that HD cart, but the cool thing is that you can combine those two boards together to create high density reverbs. They sound incredible. Let's take a quick tour of the plugin, and then we'll listen to a bunch of examples. It has a very clean and logically organized user interface. The main controls, reverb time and wet-dry mix, are always visible here on the front panel. But we have 5 submenus where we can access either broad controls like the master controls here, or more specific controls like the room character, low frequency control, advanced controls, and reflections. So let's take a little deeper dive in. Under the master tab, we have our basic reverb controls. So here we have our reverb tail, the level for that, as well as high frequency roll off. We also have control over the level of early reflections and their high frequency roll off. In the center we have output gain. The character menu is where we design the characteristics of the room that we're using for our reverb. Pre-delay sets the delay time before the onset of reverb. Now this allows us to create everything from a slapback echo type of effect or to emulate a larger room. Diffusion sets the reflectivity of the surfaces in the room. Spread determines the size of the room that we're working in. There's also a control called size. Now this is a little bit different. It sets the volume for the room, but it also brings in resonances like you'd have in a smaller room. So you want to be careful with this control. It's easy to make your reverb very resonant. Now maybe that's what you want. If you want a cleaner room, you can turn this down, there'll be less resonance. Spin rate affects the modulation that's in the reverb tail. Later on we'll see there's a wander control that sets the depth of the amount of that modulation, but this allows you to control the liveness of the room. Under the low control tab, we set up the low frequency characteristics of our reverb. Bass decay determines how fast the low frequencies fade out, and we set a frequency for where that starts to happen as well. Low boost allows us to emphasize frequencies within that low end, and this gives us resonances like you'd have in a larger room. So we have an amount of low boost, a frequency where that's happening, and you can also add a pre-delay to that. Adding pre-delay to that low boost gives you a much larger sounding room. Advanced gives us access to the treble frequencies, so we can set the treble decay or how fast the treble frequencies fade out, and also the frequency where that starts to happen. Recirculation is a very interesting control. In the original 480L, there were 2 separate processing boards even when you were working in surround. They basically operated independently. Recirculation allows you to feed from one to the other, and it gives you a much more realistic emulation of a real room. Front-rear allows us to set the blend between the front and rear channels. Now this is obvious when you're working in surround, but it's also effective when you're working in stereo because you can bring in those rear reflections and rear reverb tails and blend them along with what's happening in the front, giving you a much denser and again a much thicker, a much more responsive reverb tone. Wander sets the amount of modulation, and again the spin control that we saw on an earlier page allows you to set the speed for that modulation. Reflections is where we work on the characteristics of our early reflections. So our front delay determines how long it is before those early reflections come in, and rear allows us to work with the reflections that are coming in on the rear channels, and again you can blend those back into the front channels when you're working in stereo. We can also set the rear reflections to either mono as they are here, or stereo. In mono, the reverb image is going to collapse a little bit. You'll get a little thicker, more center focused sound. When you click on that button, the sound's going to open up and you'll have a wider stereo spread. Now that we've checked out some of the features of HD Cart, let's listen to some of the presets and how they sound on different instruments. I've got the raw tracks here for a song called The White Iris, which is on my upcoming EP Foundation. So we'll begin with snare drum. I'm going to solo the snare drum. Let's choose our factory presets. We'll start with large here. Now we'll listen on a saxophone solo. Change presets here. Let's go to lead solo. Okay. Let's go down here to chamber. Let's go to plate. We'll go to Studio A. Now we'll listen to some of the presets on grand piano. I hope you've enjoyed this look and listen to HD Cart from Reverb Foundry. It's become one of my favorite reverb processors for my DAW. I think it sounds absolutely incredible. You're definitely going to want to check it out. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.